So there are growing tensions now, and the mainstream media, the Royal Rota, won't report this, but between King Charles and Prince William, so much of this over the handling of the Harry situation, the Meghan situation, but increasingly as well, how the king is still going soft on Andrew and specifically his daughters, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie. So we're going to bring Tom Sykes, the editor of the Royalist Substack, in on this very shortly. But first, I want to get to you some of Tom's exclusive reporting. He said the king just showed us his blind spot is still ex-Prince Andrew. And while Charles may believe he's showing compassion by embracing Andrew's daughters, many Brits see a monarchy that still doesn't get it. And of course, this was over the fact that Beatrice and Eugenie were invited and arrived at the palace with a glowing smile on their face for the big pre-Christmas lunch as Andrew was banished. But perhaps the more interesting point is what this says about that ongoing conflict between the king and his heir. And Tom writes, the Royalist has led reporting on the conflict between Charles and William, which you simply will not read about in sycophantic UK media. He revealed that Charles was left particularly aghast by William's refusal to attend VJ Day memorial events and by his prevarication about attending the funeral of the Pope, which clashed with an Aston Villa game he wanted to attend. A father-son brainstorming session in Balmoral I revealed as a sham. These incidents were really a proxy war for their bitter division on Charles's insane twin decisions to try and rehabilitate both Prince Andrew, a battle William ultimately won, and Prince Harry, a fight William seems to be losing. Tom Sykes adds, I can't understand how Charles can't grasp the simple necessity of putting as much water between himself and the House of York as possible. I think that part of the problem is ironically the iron control of the media by the Royal Rota, which means that Charles, who does not engage in social media, is only presented with glowing accounts of his reign in the newspapers at breakfast. He has little idea of how extraordinarily dissatisfied people are with his management of the monarchy, or that many feel that in under 3 years he has tanked the institution's reputation. I also think there is clearly growing public anger and astonishment about his humiliating overtures to Prince Harry. Charles's handling of his younger son continues to baffle even seasoned palace watchers. There is now open discord between the king and Prince William over how Harry should be treated, a disagreement so stark it has played out in public. When Harry came to London earlier this year, Charles welcomed him to St. James's Palace for tea. William pointedly ensured he was hundreds of miles away. Such visible disunity between monarch and heir is destabilising. Seen in that context, the insistence on pressing ahead with a grand all-inclusive Christmas lunch looks like denial. It is easy to understand the impulse to declare business as usual, to gather everyone together and pretend that the fractures have healed, or at least can be papered over with tradition, but the effect to my eyes was the opposite. The inclusion of Beatrice and Eugenie served as a reminder of everything that is unresolved, mishandled, or festering beneath the surface. And Tom Sykes, there's so much to pick up on from your brilliant piece of reporting on this. And I guess for me, the most significant, and you summed it up in just such a brilliant way, is that Charles is a bit out of the loop about how his subjects really feel. Because Tobin Andre, who's his communications secretary, my former boss at the Daily Mail, an old newspaper man, has done a good job with the newspapers, right? Like, if you read the propaganda in the newspapers, yes, everything is fine. Charles has been tough on Andrew. He's dealt with Harry appropriately. The royal family is in a good position. There's no issues about the fact that lots of people are furious that Charles seems to have ditched Christianity at certain points in order to really push Islamism, another really controversial decision in light of the political climate in the UK. There's none of that. There's none of that whatsoever. Now, William, while he does have a strong relationship, particularly with Victoria Newton, the editor of my former newspaper, The Sun, realizes that newspapers, Tom, as much as we may have used to like them, are no longer the be-all and end-all. They are not representative of the public mood. And William is picking up on the fact that there is a lot of discontent and there is a lot of disdain towards Charles, even though we feel very sorry for him given his ongoing cancer battle.
Yeah, I think it's extraordinary, isn't it? Do you know what it reminds me of, Dan? It reminds me, when you were at school, we probably all had to read Animal Farm, right? Which was this allegory of, communism and the sort of control, the manipulation of information and the control of information. And there's this famous scene where the pigs call everybody to the farmyard and they read out the reports and they go, they've picked more wheat than ever. They've got 17 bushels of wheat and 17 bushels. Everyone goes, well, why are we so hungry? And that's the problem with these sort of, when you get too much control of the media, and the sort of Pravda problem, as I call it, is like the story that's going on in newspapers bears absolutely no relation to the conversation that's happening in pubs and on social media about what is actually going on with the monarchy. Like, you would be forgiven if you just picked up the newspapers and read them for a day. Yeah, you would be forgiven for thinking, that the king has a sort of minor cold and that everybody's really happy with the way that he's dealt with everything over the past 3 years. And it's just not an accurate reflection of how people aren't stupid, right? They know what the monarchy looked and felt like under Queen Elizabeth II, and they know what it looks and feels like under King Charles. And the reality is, there's just complete collapse of discipline. Now, to be fair, some of that collapse of discipline did start with the sort of stepping down of Prince Philip and the defenestration of Christopher Geit and those kinds of things. And
which Charles was behind, though. Well, certainly when it comes
Charles
to Geit.
was behind. Exactly.
Yeah.
The moment that Charles has got his hand on the tiller from about sort of 2017, 2018, something like that. That's really, to me, when it seems like the rot has started to set in. There was this incredible account of earlier in the year of Charles hosting a party for shamans at Highgrove House. I think it was in the New Yorker or something. It was unbelievable. People, running around his garden, feathers and earrings and banging drums and, prayers to the fire gods and stuff. And you're just like, wow. I mean, we always knew the guy was wacky, but like, and I think that's the sort of fun side of it, right? That's the sort of Harry Enfield, the Windsors, ha ha ha, isn't it? All hilarious. But there's actually a really serious side to it, which is that this institution, which has survived for coming up on 1,000 years, in 2066, it'll be 1,000 years, is looking really vulnerable at the moment. Now, I don't think the monarchy is going to fall. I don't think it can fall. I think they're too powerful. They're too rich. There's the whole issue of the crown estate. There's a whole load of other things. Like, I don't actually think they're going to fall. But I think it could get to a stage where they are so incredibly unpopular that they have to take a step back from public life.
Well, I think certainly if Charles has a long reign, that is a risk. Now, I do want to talk about the health. Let's get to that in just one moment, because before that, I guess you've got to look at the political climate, and that's what William is acutely aware of, right? No one would have thought that the UK's Conservative Party would fall. The most successful political party in history, right? And without wanting to get too political here, actually, probably both major political parties that have dominated the United Kingdom for the past century, the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, will fall at the next election. So these are febrile times, and I think William is acutely aware of that, and Charles is not. But on the health, this was another really interesting piece of spin. Obviously, Charles gives that stand up to cancer address on Channel 4. Certainly historic and quite extraordinary. I mean, given his mum and dad would do everything possible to not talk about their health. I mean, we never had confirmation ever that Philip or Elizabeth II ever even battled with cancer, despite doing so for years. So, of course, this was a very different tact. And the sort of headline was good. He's reducing his treatment in 2026. But the cancer remains incurable, remains terminal. There's no suggestion that he's in remission, is there? There's no suggestion that he's going to be stopping his treatment. So was this simply a PR exercise in terms of taking back control? Or is there hope that this early intervention, and obviously he has been a good patient and he has been healthy for the rest of his life prior to the diagnosis, that actually Charles could be around, for another decade, which I guess is going to pose serious issues for the monarchy, if so?
Look, I think the first thing to say, obviously, is we're all delighted for Charles.
Totally.
And, everybody, in fact, I was talking to a friend yesterday about this, and he said, well, I've had cancer 2 times. He said, and he was telling me that his sister had a similar cancer 14 or 15 years ago and had died from it. And he was like, honestly, if she'd had it now, I think she would have been fine. And certainly the advances in cancer care are unbelievable. And, anybody who's going through that, got friends going through it, we've probably all got a friend or a family member in some connection going through it. And it's incredibly exciting to see the improvements that are being made in cancer care. But again, just the monarch's job, right, is not to survive cancer, right? The monarch's job is to be a coherent point of focus and unity for the country and to maintain control over the institution. And part of how you do that is you generate an aura of invulnerability around yourself, right? Which is what the Queen always did. And you have to go back and you have to think, why was this ever announced in the first place that he had cancer, right? Why was it ever announced if 2 years later we're at a place where he's going, actually, I'm fine? There's a terrible expression in PR, trying to put the toothpaste back into the tube. And this felt to me very much like a let's try and put the toothpaste back into the tube moment. And what I have been told is that Charles and not that Charles didn't intend to announce, it was never the plan to announce that he had cancer. What he wanted to announce was that he was having benign prostate enlargement, water ablation and treatment. And I'm told it was water ablation that he had, where they basically blast water down the urethra so you can pee properly, right? Which is an incredible kind of technological advance. It's also a very trendy charity, right? Movember, like Men's Health, it's like, I'm not embarrassed to talk about my prostate and all of that. But actually, the intelligent thing to do would have been to go and have the treatment and then say afterwards that you'd had it and it had all been a success, right? Not to announce it 3 days before you go in when anything could happen. Because guess what? They open him up and they find cancer. At that stage, it's too late to just do what they should have done, which is just take 6 weeks off or 8 weeks off, just keep a really low profile, maybe do some digital things or what have you, just, keep a really low profile where you establish what the situation is. And what I feel about this, Dan, is I feel like, if this is all a massive false alarm, then I'm afraid that the king and his communications team and whoever was behind this ridiculous idea to announce that he was having the BPE treatment before he had it, which led to them having to disclose the cancer, should hang their heads in shame for putting the country, for the nation, for putting everybody through 2 years of uncertainty. If now he's going to appear 2 years later and go, oh, actually, I'm fine. Well, what have we been taught?
Yeah.
Why did you tell us? Why did you tell us? Do you know what I mean? It's absolutely crazy.
And the bizarre thing is you're actually sort of dealing with a PR double bluff in that case, because it's almost like he's now attempting to lean into the idea of transparency, because of course that is also cool and a trendy thing and maybe something that he thinks he can go down in history for having been, very open about his health in contrast to his parents. But actually, it is a double bluff because he's not really been open. He's not really been fully open. The true extent of this cancer has not been reported to the public, just like the type of cancer it is has not been reported. Now, in terms of the ongoing feud with William, obviously you're reporting that he was not going to be attending the lunch on Christmas Day. Created huge waves, Tom. And I do wonder if that was behind the appearance of the family at Buckingham Palace this week for the Christmas lunch, because of course it's the first time in some time that we have seen Catherine, William, and the children there.
Yeah, so they weren't there last year. And I think that certainly, look, that lunch was basically invented by Queen Elizabeth, but it's very much has its roots in the sort of Queen Victoria. We are the model family, and that has evolved, I think, and evolved a bit under Elizabeth to become we're not exactly the model family. We are a family doing our best, but we're just like you, and we have our difficulties and we have our problems, and you can, map your own lives onto us, etc., etc., etc. So I think that's very much the sort of animus behind that kind of Christmas lunch, and it, but then so it was great to see William and Catherine there. Catherine looking amazing, kids looking gorgeous and perfectly turned out, and again, very interesting how those kids actually do have quite a lot of privacy, despite being very well over their faces or anything like that. And thank goodness for that. But then I think that the really striking thing about that lunch was Beatrice and Eugenie driving in, looking that can only be described as the cats that had got the cream with the smiles pasted over their face in their lovely Range Rover with its white leather seats that they get on, special HP deal from and you just look at that picture of them driving in and you're just like, does anyone really want to be reminded of Prince Andrew at this exact moment? Like, does anyone really think that it's a good idea for any member of the York family to have any kind of public profile? I mean, listen, if nothing emerges for, say, the next 3 years, right, I would say totally let them come to lunch. Let them be seen, let them come to church at Sandringham, let them do whatever they want. But I would have thought, as much for their own sake now, why put the spotlight on them? Why put the spotlight on them? Like, it just seems like a really, really, the best thing that ever happened to those girls was having the police protection removed and having the sort of working royal family status removed, because they were then able to get on and do what they wanted. And so they have been immune from so much criticism that they would have got had they kept all that status. So it just seemed like a absolute, I just don't, you just look at Charles doing these things and you just think, what is he doing? And I think what the point I was trying to make in the piece, and the point that I've made throughout my reporting on the tensions between William and Charles, is that William totally understands that this is like not popular, to put it mildly. Like, you only have to look around the UK, like any street name that is called Prince Andrew Court or Prince Andrew this has had the prince sprayed out and blacked out. Like, the idea that, and then I've actually reported today that Andrew's still having his shooting weekend at Windsor next year, in January next year, which is something that I've previously reported. There was some reporting in the Telegraph today where it just very casually dropped in that he's been hosting shooting parties at Sandringham. And there's a desire in the mainstream media to say, oh, there's, Andrew's having a miserable life. He's being made to ride his horse in the rain. And, isn't everything terrible for Andrew? He's got all the curtains drawn at Royal Lodge and he's watching projections of aeroplanes landing on the walls because he's like Howard Hughes and he's gone mad and he's about to commit suicide and blah, 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 blah. But like, that is just not the reality. That is not the reality. He's moving to a really gorgeous house that's being completely refurbished for him, that's going to be fully staffed up, that's on one of the best game shooting estates in the whole of England, if not the best. It could, some people would say it is the best shooting in the country because, Dan, you go to any royal event, right? It's the best. The scones are the best, the jam's the best, the cream's the best, the staff are the best, everything's the best. And that's that. And people say, well, how can people still go shooting? I get this comment a lot. How can people still go shooting with Andrew? And there's two reasons. A, because it's the best shooting in the world, and people are into shooting, whatever you think of it, whether you're into it or you think it's just great or whatever. Like they like doing it, so they want to go to the best place in the world. And B, a lot of those people who've known him since boyhood, and it's part of their routine, and they go together, and they take a certain amount of pride in going, well, he's never been convicted of anything, he's never been proved guilty of anything, and friends and I don't give a damn what the newspapers say. I'm not going to join the mob. So it's, but and Charles, I think by instinct always sort of wanted to be Andrew is innocent until proven guilty, like blah blah. William realized years ago that Andrew had to be cut off, and that the whole family has to be cut off, and that Harry has to be cut off. Like it's very damaging, this ongoing nonsense with Harry.
I wanted to ask you about that, right? Because again, disastrous PR strategy, total mixed messages, Tom. So let's just think about what we've seen in the past week. And you summed this up perfectly, actually, in the Royalist. It was no coincidence that Camilla, at her big Christmas event, decided to show those two pictures. There they were, behind the boy in the wheelchair, two pictures from Harry and Meghan's wedding day. We know it wasn't a coincidence, just like it wasn't a coincidence when the late Queen chose to remove the pictures of Harry on her desk for the Christmas message of 2019. So you've got that. That was no coincidence. And all of the briefing coming out of Team Harry, Montecito, I think a lot of it, which is rubbish, is no, things are great since September, there's no issues, the relationship is being built. Then Buckingham Palace briefs the Times newspaper last Saturday to say, no, it's laughable that there are conversations between the King and Harry. So what's really going on?
Well, what friends of Harry do insist that there are regular conversations, and I think that they've been too bolshy by putting it out there. And I think that the story in the Times was to clip their wings. I also think that the palace did this very successfully with the Sun, right? When they said that he hadn't been treated warmly at the meeting and he was just squeezed in between two other ambassadors. It was the shortest meeting of the day. And they successfully managed, the men in grey suits, as Harry characterizes them, successfully managed to provoke Harry into saying something incredibly stupid, right? Which was that the men in grey suits were trying to sabotage his relationship with his father. And I think after the success of that, I think there was an attempt to try it again and see if they could get Harry to rise to the bait. But I think that there is obviously, we don't obviously know whether or not two individuals have private phone calls or not, right? We don't know. Perhaps they do, perhaps they don't. But what you can be absolutely sure about is that there is still a very powerful faction within the palace that feels that this is being handled very badly and that a stronger line needs to be taken.
Yeah, and William's thinking, what the hell? What the hell? Like, there's been opportunity after opportunity for there to be a tougher line, and there should be a tougher line. I mean, I was thinking about this, Tom, just to wrap up on a macro level. Surely Charles needs to be getting better advice here, because there is an opportunity for him to be part of William's modernization project, which is going to happen whether he likes it or not. But to do that, he almost has to embrace William and really get behind this and make some of the tough decisions himself. And then perhaps his reign won't go down as some type of historic flop between his wonderful mother and her historic Second Elizabethan era, and William, who is quite clearly going to be a modernizer, whether we like it or not. There are dramatic changes coming, and we'll talk about them another day. But will William be the head of the Commonwealth? Probably not. Will William be the head of the Church of England? Probably not. I mean, these are unthinkable decisions for any monarch, even just a generation ago. Charles has an opportunity to be part of that, and I think by pushing William away, it's actually a mistake of historic proportions too, because at this point, what can you say Charles's reign will be remembered for other than the botched handling of Andrew, the botched handling of Harry, and unfortunately, this very terribly timed and cruelly timed cancer battle?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been sort of fashionable to say that Charles would be a transitional figure, between Elizabeth and between the two reigns. I mean, that's not how he sees it, right? He sees himself as a very consequential figure. He sees himself as, being the great conciliator, the great bringer together, the defender of faiths, the, multicultural Britain, blah, 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 blah. And like all the evidence, all the evidence seems to suggest that people aren't massively taken by his vision, and I think that really, I'm afraid, the honest truth, if again to read the British newspapers, you're not aware of this, and so I think there's an extent to which Charles is not aware of it because he's not engaged in the same way that as we talked about. William has this very young, very digital savvy team. They'll work for places like NBC and stuff in the past. They all know what they're doing, right? They know their way around Reddit. They know, do you know what I mean? They know one end of the internet from the other. Like Charles's people do not. And so as a result, he just only sees these very glowing reports about how wonderfully he is doing. And I think you're absolutely right. Change is coming, and it's coming in the shape of William. And if Charles had any sense, he would make William the co-king, the way that Elizabeth made him the co-monarch, in the last years of her life. But I think that the problem is that Charles just, if you look at the history of his whole life, from Diana onwards, it's just a series of just terribly unpopular decisions. Like, don't forget, like, dating Camilla, continuing the relationship with Camilla, marrying Camilla, unbelievably unpopular decisions that still to this day massively impact his popularity amongst a large swathe of people, And there's a very serious, sensible argument to say that actually Charles would have been much better served to make it work with Diana and to stick it out with Diana. And, all right, it might have been a difficult marriage or a troubled marriage, but you're the king, for goodness sake. You're the king. Get with it. Suck it up. Like, there's plenty of other stuff going on in your life. Like, you make it work. Like, that's what you do. And I don't know. I think that the reign of King Charles at this stage is going to go down as just a mess.
Yeah.
A shambles.
Yeah, totally. It's an uncomfortable place to be in this Christmas. But Tom Sykes, brilliant reporting as ever. Your Substack is flying, storming up the charts. It's absolute must read for me, and I really recommend people subscribe to The Royalist on Substack. Tom Sykes is, of course, also European editor-at-large for the Daily Beast. Tom, have a wonderful Christmas and really look forward to speaking to you in 2026. Thank you so much.
Happy Christmas, Dan.
Thank you.
Prince George has followed in the footsteps of his grandmother, Princess Diana, by helping to serve Christmas dinner to homeless people during his first visit to a shelter alongside his father, Prince William. The 12-year-old future king wore an apron and joined volunteers at the Passage charity in Westminster, where he assisted with food preparation, table setting, decorating a Christmas tree and helping in the kitchen. The visit closely mirrored a moment from the early 1990s, when Princess Diana brought a young Prince William to the same charity, an experience that later shaped his lifelong commitment to tackling homelessness. During the visit, George added his name to the visitor's book on the same page, previously signed by both his father and grandmother. Observers said the moment appeared to resonate strongly with Prince William, who has been a patron of the charity for several years. The chief executive of the passage described the visit as a meaningful and emotional occasion, noting that it symbolised a full-circle moment across 3 generations. He said William appeared proud to introduce his eldest son to a cause that has long been close to his heart. George was actively involved throughout the visit, helping to assemble care packages for homeless guests, including food vouchers, toiletries and warm clothing. He later assisted with preparing food for the Christmas lunch, working alongside volunteers while his father helped in the kitchen nearby. Those present noted that the young prince seemed comfortable, curious and eager to take part. William also introduced George to former rough sleepers who had been supported by the charity and are now rebuilding their lives. The conversations highlighted the importance of community and belonging during the festive season, particularly for those without a traditional family home. The visit lasted around 1 hour before William and George departed to attend a wider family Christmas gathering. It is understood that the visit followed years of discussion about when the time would be right to introduce George to the charity's work. Palace sources said the Prince of Wales felt it was important for his son to understand homelessness firsthand and to volunteer alongside those working to support vulnerable people. The visit reflected William's broader efforts through his homelessness initiative, which aims to help end rough sleeping across the United Kingdom. Before leaving, the charity presented the princes with small gifts for George and his siblings, while William later arranged for additional food hampers to be distributed to residential centres supported by the passage.